I mean, we can actually cut back. At 8 years old, I started doing drugs. I found my mom's prescription drugs, and I tried some painkillers, and I loved it. And it was this moment in my life where I felt okay, where I felt safe, where I felt like I was almost normal, like I wasn't struggling anymore. And so I chased that my whole life, right? I did anything I could at that moment, from that moment on, to stay high, to get high, and to kill that pain that I was dealing with. And I mean, to the point I was drinking like 1 to 2 bottles of Robitussin a night. I was getting into allergy medication. I was doing everything I could. And I mean, this is something that a lot of people, I've never really heard, but drugs actually saved my life, because it did numb the pain. It did what it was intended for me to do. And because of that, I survived my childhood years. And then I started getting into the hard stuff come high school. So 17 years old, I got into cocaine. Actually 16 years old, I got into cocaine. And the way I am is I'm a all in or not type of guy, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people that have dealt with trauma are like that. A lot of people with mental illnesses are like that. And I took the cocaine to the next level. I started selling it, dealing it. I started, I was the neighborhood guy. I was getting people hooked on it. And then 17 years old, my dad basically found it and kicked me to the curb. He's a cop. I was never enabled for my behavior, I can tell you that. And actually, I'm very thankful for that, because I wasn't enabled. I was put in situations where I had to change. Except this time, I was 17, I was homeless, and I was an addict. And the first night I was out on the streets, I was introduced to methamphetamines. And again, I took it to the next level. I got to this point it was about a year of using methamphetamines in a very hard way, more than most people ever should, and taking that to such an extreme level, like where I obtained drug-induced psychosis, signs of schizophrenia, definitely bipolar right now, like still, and it ruined a lot of parts of my brain. I'm very lucky. I could say I'm definitely a miracle to be alive and to be sober right now. I was surrounding myself with extremely evil and dark people that I honestly, like, you see stuff on movies, it gets worse than that, right? I was put in situations that I would have never, ever would have been in if I didn't do drugs. But these people, like, they accepted me. They wanted me because, and nobody else did, so I took that. Right.
Sadly, this was like your family.
Absolutely. Even though there was no love, even though there was no real connection besides the drug itself, there was a place I could crash. There's a place, a person I can talk to, and someone I can do drugs with, right? Some of the most, I could tell you stories about this stuff all day long. It's crazy, the stuff that I've witnessed and saw and been a part of. There's points in that journey, in that methamphetamine part of my life, where I was held at gunpoint. I was knifed to my throat, threatening to be killed. I've overdosed 8 times in my life. I've had 3 grand mal seizures from overdoing it. I was doing so much methamphetamine at one time that these 20-year-old tweakers were telling me, like, bro, you got to slow down. Like, you're going to die. Like, that's too much. And I didn't care. I wanted to die. It got to such a bad point to where I was seeing demons. And if I wasn't hallucinating with that psychosis and the signs of schizophrenia, I wasn't high enough. Like, that's how deep I was. And I was that guy on the side of the road yelling at cars. If you can see my face, you can see all the scars from picking on my face. That bad. It was that deep. And actually, this point, everybody I grew up with and knew had no idea where I was, what I was doing. Actually, when I came back into society, they're like, hey, man, how you doing? It's like, oh, you have no idea, right? So I separated myself from everybody and put myself in this horrible situation. Got to a point where I was in my car with actually a bunch of minor 16 and 17-year-olds, in the town of Folsom, California, Sacramento area. And we're sitting on the side of the road in my Honda. I did have a car. I did have a Honda Accord. I basically had a car and a pizza job and drugs. That was my life. I lived in my car. You know what I mean? And I had these minors in my car, and I'm taking, rolling out the lines and showing off my drugs. And 3 cops pulled behind me with their lights on. And my heart dropped, bro. Just dropped. And I just looked at them and I was like, don't say a word. Just let me talk, right? And basically they just chattered. They talked. They said, they threw me under the bus. It is what it is, right? And I had like an ounce of weed on me, a couple grams of hash. I had about an 8 ball of cocaine and an 8 ball of methamphetamines and like a meth pipe on me and a weed pipe. And they took me to jail. I had just turned 18 years old. I was about 125 pounds at this time. Sucked up. I wasn't eating for 3 weeks at a time. I wasn't drinking water. I wasn't sleeping for 3 weeks at a time. I'd stay up that long and all I would consume was methamphetamine until I would literally pass out somewhere, and I don't even remember falling asleep. Like, I'd just go as hard as I could. I'd wake up in places I had no idea where I was. I woke up in the middle of the street in my car once, and with a cop tapping on my window. He's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, I don't know. He's like, "Get home." Just crazy stuff, like skipping through time. And here I am, 18 years old. I'm in Sac County jail, and I'm scared, bro. I'm scared. I had no more access to drugs, so I was now detoxing. I spent 14 days in Sac County in a cell by myself, detoxing, and that was the first moment in my life since I was 8 years old that I was sober. And I started to see that it was okay. It's kind of a trip, right? It took that for me to see that, wow, it's not that bad being sober. And she met me and she loved me. Like, I was homeless. I lived in a little tarp like on the river, and she just loved it for some reason. It's actually why I love her so much, is because she accepted me like at my worst. And it's just amazing. She's actually, the first time I ever felt loved was from my wife. I never felt loved before. I never knew what that was. And she got my heart, and man, we got married pretty quick. We ended up, I got her pregnant after 3 years of marriage. And she was drinking with me, but she quit when she got pregnant. She cleaned her life up, but I was still going. I was still drinking every day. And it got to a point, my son is 1 year old, and I've caused so much damage to that family by drinking every day, by causing arguments, by just being a victim, and just not giving what I should be giving, not bringing what I should be bringing to the table as far as love, as far as protection, as far as acceptance. And it got to a point where my wife, she was just like, "You're not fit to be my husband. You're not fit to be a father." And they packed their stuff, right, and they left. And this was the transition part of my life right here. This is the most important part. After all of that's happened in my past, I was here, and again, I lost everything, and I was alone, not fit for the world, right? And everything going through my head is like, man, like, life sucks. Like, I'm not meant to be here. Like, that whole victimhood mindset. And about 4 months, I upped my alcohol. I got back into hard drugs, and I just took it to the next level. And 4 months later, I was sitting on my bed, and I decided I'm going to kill myself. And that's when I took my pistol and I put it in my mouth, and I was crying, I was sobbing, I was screaming. I was gonna pull the trigger, finger on the trigger, and then something just clicked, and that was the beginning of it all. What happened was I had this vision of my wife being loved from another man, my son calling somebody else dad, and it was enough pain for me to just like pull that gun out of my mouth, right? And then I started, I don't know, this is definitely a work of God. It absolutely is. but he let me see that it was my fault that I was there with the gun in my mouth, that it was my fault. It was the first time I ever took responsibility for anything, was that moment. I realized that my past action had led me to this point in my life. And that empowered me to see that my actions from now moving forward can also change the outcome of my life. I could be that dad. I could be that husband. And from that moment on, I decided I'm gonna do this.